Hi, I'm Dr. Lawrence Woods, and a common question I get every day is how do I sit if I have piriformis syndrome? So if you have piriformis syndrome, I get it, it's awful, it's a terrible thing, but listen, there's some good things you can do, really great tips I'm going to give you how to ameliorate that or potentially correct it, so to speak. So if you have piriformis syndrome, let's go through some basic points here. Number one, movement. If you have piriformis syndrome, you want to keep moving, and ideally, if you're moving, if you get up every 20 or 30 minutes, that would be textbook perfect. But if you can't do that, even if you could just stand up and sit back down again, what this is going to do, this is going to break these patterns, and you don't want to get into these sedentary patterns sitting, because if you're sitting, your body's going to complacently adapt to the position you're in. So you want to keep moving, and so that's why it's critical to keep moving. Okay, number two, you want to sit in alignment. Now notice my knees and my feet are shoulder width apart, and that's very, very important. You want to sit in this position roughly, let's say, a foot apart, okay? You don't want to sit with your foot underneath your hips, because that's going to create tension or alignment. You never want to cross your knees. So you want to sit with your knees shoulder width apart, feet on the ground, okay? And that keeps you in alignment. Number three, and this is the critical part, and I hope you made it to this part of the video, because piriformis, if we look at the piriformis muscle, it starts at the base of the spine. It's a flat muscle, and it goes right across to the top of your thighs. Now, the thing that makes the problem with piriformis is that the sciatic nerve sometimes goes underneath the piriformis, or if it's a really bad condition, it actually goes through the piriformis muscles. There's two, and when that nerve goes through, the sciatic nerve goes through it, and this muscle spasm, they actually scissor down or clamp down on that sciatic nerve, giving you leg pain or sciatica. So here's what you need to do for that. I found with my patients that when we put them in a posture where their hips are above their knees, that tilted the pelvis forward and it released the pressure in the glutes. Let me explain what I mean by this, because this is a very, very important point for you to get. When you sit in a normal chair, where we're told at 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, the spine and the pelvis rolls back and the spine goes relatively straight, like a pogo stick, in the y-axis. And when you sit like that, you're actually creating tension in the nerve roots and the discs. And so that could, if you have piriformis syndrome, that's going to exacerbate it. It's going to cause these muscles to spasm, and you're not going to feel too good. So what we found was if you increase the hips over your knees, if you sat, let's say, on a wedge, and we figured out a perfect angle for that, when you sit with your hips above your knees, what that does is that tilts that pelvis forward. Now watch this. We go from 90, 90, 90, and your spine and the y-axis is like a pogo stick, and you're compressing those discs, those joints, those muscles, those nerves. When we sit with your hips above your knees, that actually tilts the pelvis forward, and it puts your spine back into this neutral posture, an S-curve. And what that does, it creates a coil or spring. And so the load disbursement doesn't go necessarily that much into your discs and your joints, it goes back into your muscles. So you're engaging those core muscles. Now the core is a very important point. And in my world, the core is any muscle that connects to your hips. And that's from your shoulders all the way to your knees. So we're looking at like 29 different muscle groups. But you want to keep them balanced and you want to keep them engaged. So you're dispersing, it's like playing, it's like in music in an orchestra. Like if one or two people are playing your instruments, it's really awful. But if you have all those 29 muscle groups orchestrating perfectly together, you're dispersing that weight equally in a balanced fashion, and it feels so much better because you're taking the pressure off the areas that you're loading, primarily the piriformis muscle, and you're dispersing it back into your body. When you're sitting, you want to make sure your hips are above your knees, and roughly, we figured out, it's roughly about 110 degrees between trunk and thigh, and that has you in a nice neutral posture, and it really makes it feel so much better. Now, if I take this cushion out, notice my back straightens out, my shoulders round. I'm not using my muscles here, I'm not using my muscles here, I'm not using my muscles here, but I'm sitting hinging from my spine, and I'm hinging down on the piriformis muscle, which is making it feel, I don't even have piriformis syndrome, but I actually feel pain in my piriformis right now, sitting in this fashion, okay? So let me go through a few things you should consider if you want to sit this way. Out of frustration for my patients, I've never felt comfortable advising how to sit on a seat cushion or a chair, because every time, I really learned the hard way, every time I referred them or recommended something, it always came back to bite me in the long run. It didn't really, it was very frustrating, and frustrating not for me, but for them, more so for them, because they're wasting their time, wasting their money. So a lot of materials you should, I think, you should consider avoiding. And one thing would be the polyurethanes or memory foams, because they're cheap plastic. It's like a kitchen sponge, and they just collapse. They don't hold you up. And I find if you have piriformis syndrome, it's not gonna give you the support you need. So if you're looking for a seat cushion, I recommend getting a seat cushion with a polyfoam base, something really rigid to hold that angle. Make sure that your hips are well above your knees, and it's not going to collapse and hold you there all day long. Now, but you don't want to get pressure problems there. So the top foam should be soft. Now, the best foam in the entire world for this type of cushion would be natural latex, and we've tested everything, and nothing even comes close to natural latex, because natural latex is not only soft, but it has this what they call resilience. It's that springiness. It pushes back, and so it keeps the bony prominence of your hips suspended in animation, and so it keeps your body kind of like a bit of resonance. You're kind of moving all day long. It's cushiony, it's springy, and it's a lovely material. And I can't recommend anything else but that for my patients. The fabric needs to be, the top fabric that you sit on needs to be isotropic, which means it should stretch in 4 dimensions, because it doesn't matter if it doesn't stretch, it doesn't matter what's underneath the cover, it's not going to work. So the cover needs to stretch in 4 dimensions. I recommend a 4-way stretch vegan leather, and I found this is a lovely material. It's very soft, very comfortable, and it's grippy. It's going to hold you, because again, when you're sitting with your hips above your knees, you want to make sure that that's going to hold you in place, and this is just a lovely feel to that. Now, the bottom of your seat cushion should have a non-slip surface. So if it's on your kitchen chair, the bus, your car, airplane, you want it to hold in that position. You don't want it sliding out and where you're uncomfortable. Okay. And lastly, and very important, it should be portable, because you want to make sure if you have piriformis syndrome that you are in the right posture wherever you go. Let's say if you have to drive to work, or you're at work, you take this with you to work. If you go to see a movie, a lot of people who have piriformis syndrome are afraid to even take flights. And like, if you could take this with you, just take it with your luggage, you're good to go. So these are my recommendations, and I appreciate you watching this channel.